If you stand in pitch black and hear the unmistakable roar of a predator, your survival instinct is simple. You run in the opposite direction. But if that exact same darkness suddenly produces the terrified cry of someone you love, your instinct flips. You run straight into the danger. The most dangerous entities in folklore understand this paradox. They bypass human fear entirely by weaponizing our deepest affections. Psychologists identify this as an empathy trap. A threat creates a fear input that triggers a flight response, but an empathy input hacks the system. It overrides the logical firewall, forcing an approach action despite the risk. The ultimate horror involves a predator that weaponizes care, demanding your empathy to ensure your destruction. Sujit was physically exhausted and highly vulnerable, traveling through a notorious jungle on the pitch-black night of an Amavasya storm. He sought physical refuge from the violent weather within an ancient, isolated Shiva temple, desperate to get off the flooded roads. Inside, a resident sadhu delivered an absolute, unbending rule for survival. Under no circumstances was Sujit to step outside the temple after midnight, regardless of who or what called his name. With that warning, the temple threshold transformed into a psychological boundary, testing Sujit's discipline against the unseen force waiting in the dark. The psychological attack began when the sounds of the storm were suddenly pierced by a voice. It was a perfect mimic of Sujit's mother, crying out for help. The entity targeted Sujit with a specific script, aggressively begging him to come out and calling him her brave son. It used guilt and filial duty to override his natural survival instincts. This is the work of the Chaya, a parasitic shadow spirit capable of reading a victim's mind to locate their most intense emotional attachment. The Chaya scans a victim's memories, locking on to a specific frequency, Sujit's mother. It calibrates the illusion so the victim feels responsible for her survival. By imitating the mother, it turns Sujit's protective nature into the bait that ensures his death. The ghost relies on internal conflict to break its victims. Staying inside keeps Sujit logically safe, but it leaves him feeling morally bankrupt, proving the devastating effectiveness of the trap. Emotional manipulation eventually broke Sujit's logic. He began moving toward the temple door, intent on saving the illusion. The sadhu intervened just in time, forcibly yanking Sujit back from the threshold as he was about to cross. The environment became a clash of sounds, the manipulative, chaotic sobbing of the Chaya outside against the rigid, disciplined chanting of the sadhu inside. The sadhu deployed the Maham Ritunjaya and Kal Bhairav mantras. These acted as a literal acoustic and psychological barrier against the ghost's frequency. This climax functions as an intellectual battle where ancient spiritual discipline serves as the only defense against raw, weaponized emotion. Morning revealed the lethal reality of the threat. Frantic, non-human footprints circled the exact boundary of the temple, proving something had been waiting for Sujit all night. The sadhu revealed that the Chaya was once a widow who died of profound grief and madness following the loss of her husband. Consumed by her own pain, she is now doomed to trap others by mimicking the very love that destroyed her. The Chaya represents a manifestation of unhealed, infectious trauma, seeking to replicate its own suffering in others. Sujit eventually returned to his village to find his real mother perfectly safe. This discovery retroactively highlighted the sheer cruelty of the entity's deception. This folklore carries a heavy psychological lesson. Humans are most vulnerable exactly where they love the most. Maintaining strict psychological boundaries is a necessity, even when emotional instincts demand irrational action to save someone. Survival sometimes requires the agonizing discipline to ignore the voice of the person you love most, if logic dictates it is a trap.